Seen from the sky, the Cerrado looks like a mosaic of fields with patches of savanna-like forest seen here or there. These high plateaux in the heart of Brazil are perfect for ploughing or spreading pesticides, an El Dorado for soya producers who are in the sights of these environmental defenders.
We're going to stop on the road to see a recently deforested area. It was detected by MAP Biomass on the 30th of September, and there we can see the before and after. Let's go and see it for ourselves.
With his colleagues from the WWF, Boris Paton-Treget has come to take a look at the most recent deforestation sites detected by satellite, like this farm.
Oh yes, it's the First World War.
Most access points are closed, probably to prevent the curious from passing through. Behind this thin strip of forest, more than 600 hectares of Cerrado have been razed in just a few days. The deforested area will not remain pristine for long.
They start like that. They destroy the vegetation, they remove everything. They burn it, and then they spread limestone on the ground. It's called wedging. And then, probably at the end of the year, they'll start to plant.
Soya grown here is highly likely to end up feeding European cattle.
There's around a third or more which goes directly to France, almost 300,000 tons per year, which come from this factory, which is a few miles from here. So we're almost certain that the soya that's planted here, if nothing changes, may well go to France. It's bad, huh? It's really recent. It was September.
And it's this date that's the problem.
This is not in compliance with the EU. It's not in compliance with the French strategy to combat imported deforestation, because that says there should be no more soya conversion after January 2020.
Was it definitely after 2020?
This took place in September 2023. It's Cerrado, so it's a natural ecosystem. And so here we're not in compliance with what France or the EU demand.
Europe is the second largest importer of soya from the region after China. The law imposed by the EU doesn't seem to have any effect here. While deforestation diminished in the Amazon last year, in the Cerrado it increased by 43%. In 40 years, this biome, which covers an area 4 times the size of France, has lost more than half of its vegetation cover, with entire forests wiped off the map.
Is it closed?
Another operator is in their sights.
It's the next level.
It's private property. They have things to hide, that's for sure.
It's impossible to access the Santa Isabel farm, accused of illegal land grabbing, including entire villages like this one, or at least what remains of it.
We see on the map that there were houses right next door. There was a church there which no longer exists. There was a school. There were several houses. The only thing left is this circular construction.
Excavators buried everything just 4 months ago.
An old educational DVD. That's all that's left of the school.
In the last 4 years alone, Santa Isabel has turned more than 3,400 hectares of native Cerrado into soya fields, in large part by eating into reserves protected by Brazilian law. 90 families lived here. They were all evicted. Only 6 still remain, like Edson's family.
They gave 10,000 euros to the families who left. They want to give me the same for my house, but I don't want it. We can't do anything with that amount. But people move to the town, to Luis Eduardo.
They negotiate the lowest possible price, and once people receive their money, they erase everything. They remove the fruit trees, the electricity stations. They cover the ruins of the houses with earth. They flatten everything with tractors. So it's like this community never even existed.
Do you know where the soybeans from this farm are sent?
They go to the bungee factory.
It all goes to Bungie.
Yes, it is sent to Bungie, then exported abroad.
Bungie is the world leader in processing soybeans into meal and vegetable oil. These imposing silos are the pride of Luis Eduardo Magalhães, the regional agricultural capital. According to the group's latest customs declarations, 38% of their stock stored here is exported to France every year. Last November alone, 85,000 tons of soya beans went from here to the port of Montoire in France. We contacted Bunge about their links with the two farms visited in our report, and they replied,
We reaffirm that we have no direct or indirect commercial relationship with the operations mentioned above.
We followed the soya from Santa Isabel Farm's gates. Every day, like this one, several trucks head towards the famous Bunge factory. Up to this huge parking lot. No producers' associations in the region agreed to speak to us. To get answers, we had to travel hundreds of miles to Sao Paulo, the business capital. That day, members of the WWF Association have a meeting with Abiovi, a powerful lobby of grain dealers. It represents the biggest names in the soya industry, like Bunge, Cargill, Louis Dreyfus, and JBS.
Well, we need to have willingness also from companies, of course the farmers. We need to create awareness. It takes some time.
Guillaume Tessier and his colleagues came to remind them that their members have until December 2024 to comply with European legislation.
You're not a police. You want to be act as a police, and we don't
Even
accept
those
that.
that are fully legal, doing everything legal.
They have a political issue, so
Yeah.
probably the associations, the local associations, will recommend to not share the information with us.
The solution put forward by the association: store soya from deforested land before 2020 and therefore exportable to Europe in different silos to soya grown in deforested areas after that date.
European legislation has no influence on deforestation. Yes, Europeans will be able to consume products free from deforestation. But if there is no financial compensation from the EU for farmers who don't cut down the forest, it will be of no use. It's important to say, after the ban on imports of GMO soya, then certified soya, this is the third time that the EU has proposed a plan that has no effect.
Producers are only obliged to respect Brazilian law. In the Amazon, they're required to protect 80% of their land, and in the Cerrado, the ratio is the reverse. They only need to protect 20% of legal reserves that they can find anywhere, sometimes miles away from their fields. And it doesn't matter who was there before.
They stole 18 kilometers of barbed wire fence from us and cut the barriers over 4 or 5 kilometers.
The men in this convoy crossing part of the Cerrado that's still intact seem to be going to war. A few months ago, invaders burned their cattle enclosure and destroyed this bridge to prevent them from accessing their ancestral lands. The work is carried out under police escort because by installing these few sections of wood, these farmers are risking their lives. The last attack took place on April the 11th.
I was shot.
The bullet entered here and it lodged here.
Farmers know very well that these have been our lands for centuries. I've always lived here. They are invading our lands and pushing us back.
The bullet entered here and perforated my intestine in 5 different places. It's lodged a centimeter from my spine.
They were attacked by men they nickname pistoleiros, armed men who they're convinced are hired by several large landowners suspected of green speculation. They claim these 100,000 hectares as their legal reserve.
Look at these bullet holes. That's to intimidate us.
We leave the house and our children say, "Don't go, Dad, don't go, it's so dangerous." But we have no choice, and this kind of thing happens.
As descendants of indigenous and enslaved people, centuries ago they were granted the use of these public lands and had no intention of leaving them. Accompanied by their lawyer, they organized their resistance.
At the last hearing, there was no document that proved their so-called ownership. They don't own this land, and the rural community has had the use of this land for years.
And the property deeds that they have?
They're completely false. If they did not provide any document, it's because this title deed does not exist.
They say public environmental protection authorized them to dig 7 water wells.
Why do they allow this?
Money! There are plenty of uncontrolled water concessions here.
The community is also fighting to defend the rich Cerrado aquifer, considered the water reservoir of Brazil. Yet miles away, voracious soya crops are gradually drying up the water table and the rivers that flow downstream here. According to the latest samples taken by the Ministry of Health, traces of 27 different types of pesticides were found in the region's waterways.
The number of cancers here in the Quarantina region is absurd. I lost my father, a nephew, and 2 brothers-in-law, all because of pesticides. This is the consequence of agribusiness dispersing pesticides on its farms, which pollute our rivers. And this is the water we drink.
On the way back, when the danger seems to have passed, our convoy is stopped. Those blocking the road work for a private security company suspected of having attacked the community. They're employed by the Bandeirantes farm, one of the farms accused of land grabbing in the region.
There have been attempted homicides when they come to their land.
We are forced to leave every time. You treat us like animals. It's a lack of respect.
25 complaints have already been filed against them, with no action taken.
All these problems with them in relation to the land are old ones.
They talked about very recent attacks.
Whether there is violence or not, there is the police. All they have to do is file a complaint at the police station. My colleagues and I are going to stay here. We have a contract to respect.
The convoy finally manages to carry on along the road which crosses the farm, which seems abandoned. For now, this stretch of Cerrado appears intact. But for how long? What could threaten a huge part of this biome is a tiny detail which worries the French environmental activists.
To measure, you have to put it at your eye level, and you have to see the canopy.
Boris Patton-Treger and his colleagues are measuring the trees because protecting them depends on a few centimeters.
One of the largest trees in the area is 4.2 meters. They're more or less all below that one, so we mostly have trees that are less than 5 meters.
5 meters is precisely the minimum height considered to be a forest according to European law.
This area is clearly an area that is not considered a forest by the EU. If it is converted, which will surely happen in the coming years, it will be considered as soya that can be imported into Europe.
A loophole in the law means deforestation would be legal in the eyes of European law. A tragedy for these environmental activists.
Here are the tracks of a very small hare. Here, too, a trace of a lizard.
The Cerrado is home to 5% of the planet's biodiversity.
It's due to speculation. Areas like that are cheaper than areas that have already been deforested. We are on one of the most intense and large-scale fronts of ecosystem destruction in the world. We're trying to stop this, and it's very possible. We know that there is enough space to be able to continue producing without cutting down a single tree, a single bush for generations.
According to a recent Brazilian study, the Cerrado has 38 million hectares of land already suitable for planting soya beans, and without the need to cut down more forests.